It's recording. So, good afternoon, all of you, and advance Happy New Year to all of you. So, today is the last class of 2020, and we'll continue till the 10th January 2021. Hopefully, we'll able to complete. So, we're discussing about Gia Burney, and in the last class, we discussed the theory of kingship by Giovanni, and today we will touch his concept of ideal polity. Right now, to understand uh, the ideal polity given by Giovanni, it is necessary to understand his concept of law, his concept of army, his concept of bureaucracy, and his concept of justice. And all these concepts are very much inclusive to each other, they are complementary and supplementary. So these are not distinct concepts having significance separate to each other. So law is connected with the army, army is connected with the bureaucracy, bureaucracy is connected with the justice, justice is connected with the law, and or we can say that law is connected with army, bureaucracy, justice. Army is connected with the bureaucracy, justice, and law. Bureaucracy is connected with the justice, law, and army. And justice is connected with the law, army, and bureaucracy. We can say in that way. So the first thing is, or the first aspect of ideal polity is law. I have already said uh, that Barney suggested the Sultan or the king to follow the Shariat, right? So Shariat is a Islamic uh, Islamic rules and regulation or Islamic law, and here Barney categorized law into two kinds. So one is the Shariat law, and another is the Javit. I don't know whether I'm pronouncing it correctly or not, but the spelling of that Javit is Zawabit, right? So I'm pronouncing it as Javit. So there are two kinds of law. One is the Shariat law, and what is the Shariat law is all about? Shariat law is all about the teaching and practice of Prophet, right, Muhammad. And the second kind of law is the Javit law, and this law primarily, this is a state law formulated by the Sultan in consultation with nobility. In the last class, I told you about this nobility, right? Consultation with the nobility in a situation where Shariat was unable to fulfill. So, if there is a situation or demand of a situation where uh, the Shariat is not dealing with that situation, in that situation, Sultan, in consultation with nobility, he can bring the state laws, what is called the Javit. Now, so far as the state law or Javit is concerned, Bernie cautioned that the lawmaker must take into account the practices of the past and contemporary socio-political condition while formulating the laws. Now, this is very important, right? And I am basically impressed by, uh, you know, by this, you know, account of Gia Burney. You know what Burney is suggesting that if the king has to, make a state law for the Javit, then the king must take into account the practices of the past with the present socio-political condition while making the law, right? So you have to combine the past with the present need, past practices and present need. That should the base of the state law or the Jabhat. Bodney is suggesting this. And today you can think about the modern laws, what is emerging from parliament or state legislature. To what extent all these laws are uh, you know guided by, or all the laws are based by the practices of the past and the present socioeconomic condition. I mean, the demand of the socioeconomic condition of presently. To what extent that plays a role in making a laws or act, and to what extent the practices of past plays a role. I mean, ideally, both are very important, inputs for making any law. Now this Javed must be in the spirit of Shariat. Burney enumerated four conditions for its formulation. So this state law, which is or which was enacted by the Sultan or the king, that should be in the spirit of Shariat. I mean, the state law, the Javed, it cannot violate the Shariat. So Javed has to has to refer to the Shariat or has to be drawn from the Shariat. Right. Now Burney enumerated four conditions for the formulation of state law or Javed. What are the four conditions? The first condition is that Javed should not negate the Shariat. The first condition, that it should always correspond to the Shariat law. That's the first condition of the state law. I mean, the state law should not be and cannot be negate the Shariat. And the second, it must increase the loyalty and hope among the noble and common people towards the Sultan. So the state law must resort towards the loyalty and hope of the nobles and common people towards the king. It should not go against the king. The state law should not go against the king. And the third, conditions of state law or the Javed is that it is the source and inspiration, or its source and inspiration should be from the Shariat. So mostly it is something that is you know uh, guided by the Shariat law. So the state law or the Javed must uh, must be derived from the Shariat. Right? Then the state law should be inspired by the Shariat law. And the fourth condition is that if at all the state law had to negate the Shariat out of urgent need, then it must follow the charity and compassion in lieu of that negation. Right? And this is important. Right? So if at all the state law goes against the Shariat law, then the state law must you know pay a kind of uh, sorriness to the chariot, right? It must ask the compassion of the chariot. The state law must uh, need or must ask the compassion for the from the chariot because of this negation. So if at all there is a situation where the state law is going against the Shariat law, then the state law must ask, forgiveness from the Shariat, must ask the compassion or compassionate, attitude from the Shariat. Now this is the law. Then the second is the army. Now, army is one of the pillar of administration, and it was organized and it was based on the Turkish Mongol model. Turkish Mongol model means it is basically, uh, I mean, Turkish Mongol model. I am just letting you know. Mostly it is a ethno-cultural synthesis, a model of ethno-cultural synthesis, that arose in the Asia during the 14th century among the ruling elite of the, uh, okay, not necessary. Well, so basically this Turk-Mongol tradition, or here I am just saying Turkish Mongol model, is basically a ethno-cultural synthesis. And why, this ethno-cultural synthesis is important so far as this army is concerned. Uh, basically, the army was, divided in such a way that almost all category of people uh, were included in the army. So so we need to understand that categorization of the army. Then we can realize this Turkish Mongol model of army, right? So army was divided into four parts. So one is the infantry. Infantry means the foot soldier, right? So who will be the foot soldier? Only those who are downtrodden class, right? To whom actually education uh, underprivileged. So these foot soldiers are the underprivileged class of the society. That is the first part of the army in infantry, and the second part of the army is the uh, cavalry, 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 or the horsemen. And third one is the war elephant, and fourth one is uh, auxiliary, right? Auxiliary means uh, you know person who are or who drives boats, who drives who are actually auxiliary. In the book it is written boats and engineers. So I'm also not clear about what is this auxiliary means. So far this cavalry, horsemen is concerned. Now this category was further divided into three wings. One is the Momatav, Momatav. The second is the Sawar, and the third is the Do Ashwa, right? Do Ashwa. So this Momata means soldier without any horse, and Savar, S-A-W-A-R, Savar means soldier with single horse, and this Do Ashwa, soldier with two horses, right? So all these categories, this cavalry, as I said, it is, further divided into three categories. Then the war elephant, auxiliary, infantry. These are the different, parts of the army, and in different parts of the army, there are different kinds of, personnel that gets the recruitment into different parts. So in a sense, you will find this the army, what the Gia Burning is suggesting, that army is basically, it is an army where one can find ethnocultural synthesis, uh, almost all kinds of people, irrespective of religion, or irrespective of uh, different cleavages, they are included. Right. So, as the Sultanate ultimately rested on the power of the army, Borni advised the king to take greater care in its efficiency, checking the corruption and conspiracy within it. So, when the army is characterized by a kind of ethnocultural synthesis, then there is a possibility that due to the presence of plurality, there is a there is a chance of corruption, there is a chance of conspiracy, and there is a chance of inter competition, and this inter competition may affect the efficiency of the army. Now in that situation, what Bernie is advising the Sultan, that the Sultan has to take care in its efficiency, right? He has to see uh, the kind of relationship all these army people they are having with each other, right? That relationship will actually gives rise to the efficiency of the army, and the king has to check the corruption and different kinds of conspiracy uh, that exist within the army due to the plural presence of different kinds of people, right? And why the sultan should be should take greater care of the army? It's because the entire sultanate, right, entire the kingdom, right, it was rested on the power of the army. So if the army is weak, then the kingdom or the sultanate is gone. So the main function of army was the security and expansion of the state. In modern day also, in modern day we think about the security, internal and external security. But at the time, you know, uh, besides this security function, uh, the function of army was also the expansion of the state. What Kautilya was actually saying, expansion of the territory. Mostly this Muslim political thought, or Muslim king or sultan, Hindu political thought or Hindu king, mostly they corresponds to each other. Mostly there are many common feature or commonalities. So the expansion of the state is the second function of the army. The first function is the security of the state. The second function is the expansion of the state. Apart from this, the army acquired importance for another reason as well. And what is that region? Now it acted as the facilitator in the expansion of Islam, either through converting the local aristocracy into Islam faith or inheriting them. Right? Either the people will convert to the Islam. That's how Islam will broaden its social base, right? So the army is being used for that purpose of converting, or converting or broadening the social base of the Islam. And how to broaden the social base? It is through the conversion of the local aristocracy into the Islamic faith. Either you have to convert yourself, or you will be annihilated. Right? So out of the fear, so people were converting, right? So that is the army. Then the next is the bureaucracy. Now, bureaucracy is a necessary component of the Sultanate. The function of bureaucracy was to measure the land, fix the tax, and collect it for its disbursement among the beneficiary. So the function of bureaucracy is to collect the tax, fix the tax, collect the tax, measuring the land, how much land, who is holding how much of land, then disbursing the tax among its beneficiaries. So collection of the tax and execution or implementation of that tax, or using that tax, right? That is the main function of the bureaucracy. Now, in the absence of bureaucracy, every existence of the ruling class would have become, redundant. Even the army would not have sustained itself. So, bureaucracy. Why bureaucracy is important? Bureaucracy is important because of this tax. Right? If there is no tax, then not only army, is affected, but also the ruling class. Nobody will uh, uh, you know, give their voluntary obedience or obligation to the sultan or to the king. Right? So, in the absence of bureaucracy, the very existence of the ruling class would have become redundant, and even the army would not have sustained itself. Now, it operated at the three levels: center, province, and village. So, I am not going into it that who are those people who are in the center and what is the name of their post. Right? So, you read from your own. The revenue was collected on the basis of the estimated prepared for each locality. The revenue was collected on the basis of the estimate prepared for each locality and based on their revenue paying capacity. And the salary of the staffs was paid from this revenue as per their status. Right? So what is the you know on how the tax was fixed? The tax was fixed in a particular locality based on what is the capacity of the people to give how much revenue, and accordingly there are different locality, and different locality for different locality an estimate is prepared, and on that preparation tax is is collected, right? And the salary of the staffs, so those who are working in the sultanate, right? Their salary of the staffs was paid from this revenue as per their status. There are different position, different position and different salary. So their salary is mostly uh, it is from this collection of the revenue. The revenue amount collected was the half of the production of the pigeons, which was levied separately on their land holding. So those who are having a land, right, and uh, out of the whole production, the 50%, half of the production, 50% production was actually the revenue at that time. So king was levying the 50% of the production from different peasants having land holding. So peasants having the land, Right? Out of their production, they were giving 50% as the tax. Now the tax was fixed and was collected. Tax was fixed and collected on each unit of the area, irrespective of the produce of the current year in a harvest. So once the amount of tax is fixed, then that amount uh, was collected, and doesn't matter whether you know the current year harvest, or whether it is rich or poor, doesn't matter. So once tax is fixed, you have to give that tax. So besides this land revenue, other burdens were also imposed upon the peasants, like the tax on the cattle or the grazing, tax, animal husbandry. So those, uh, you know, animal husbandry is also one kind of, what I will say, one kind of uh, production, right? From that also, agriculture is also one kind of production. Animal husbandry is also another kind of production. Even from the animal husbandry also, tax were collected. Overall, the tax burden was heavy because 50% of the production was going in the form of tax. Overall, this tax burden was heavy, particularly for the lower strata, upon whom the upper strata passed on their own burden as well. Right? So those, as I, when I said that there are three, levels: center, province, and village level. In these three levels, there was bureaucracy. At the village level, basically the Chaudhuris, right? They were collecting tax, right? So sometimes the this you know uh, mm, upper strata of the society, those who are actually jamindar, right, Chaudhary, uh, those the upper strata of the society, they were demanding from the lower strata of the society to give their share of tax uh, to to the king or to the sultanate, right? So it was becoming a double, kind of exploitation on the lower strata of the people. So 50% uh, will go to the sultanate treasury, right? This is one exploitation. The second exploitation was that this, upper strata of the society, it was actually again demanding the lower strata of the society again give more as a tax, so that the upper strata of the society was getting a certain portion of tax relaxation, right? So it was becoming a kind of double exploitation on the lower strata of the society. So that's why the tax burden becomes very heavy on the lower strata of the society. Now, in this context, Borni advised the Sultan to check this corruption, right? Mostly corruption happens at the grassroots grassroots level, right? So in this context, Borni advised the Sultan to check the corruption and recognize the rights of the people and protecting weak against the strong, right? So sometimes one can feel Bernie is a very secular person, and sometimes uh, one can feel the Bernie is communal. So when we are you know uh, kind of uh, designating Bernie either as a secular or communal, then there is a problem. The problem is that today we are situating ourselves in today's time, and from this time we are looking at the past, and then we are blending them, and hermeneutically it is like it should not happen, right? So Bernie knew that there is a you know kind of double exploitation on the lower strata of the people. So, in order to check the corruption, in order to protect the rights of people, in order to protect the weak from the strong, Borni advised Sultan. Right? Now, this is all about your bureaucracy. Then the justice. Now, to maintain justice in the administration, Borni was all encompassing from the remission of land tax to the supply of commodities to the buyer at the production cost, and from dispensing civil and criminal case to granting monetary help to the needy from the state treasure. He was suggesting the Sultan to maintain justice, and the reason behind this suggestion was twofold. One, a hike in the price of commodities would affect the army, particularly the subaltern rank or the people belonging to the lower strata. And the second, it might have led the discontentment among the general public. Now, this concept is also very relevant today, right? So today, uh, you know, uh, any policies, whether it is farmer policy or any kinds of policy, then the general public is getting affected by that. So there is a kind of protest of general public against the government, and even that situation was also prevailing during the time of Alauddin Khilji or Muhammad bin Tughlaq. Now, for that, Borni was suggesting that if such a situation arise, especially natural calamities, then you should remit the land tax, right? You should give the freedom to the people not to give tax, right? To supply of commodities at the to the buyer at the production cost. I mean, the state will not take any profit from that, right? So from Borni was all encompassing from remission of the land tax to supply of commodities to the buyer at the production cost, and from dispensing civil and criminal case to granting monetary help to the needy from the state treasure. So Borni was going to that extent. If there is a situation, then monetary help should also be given to the needy people from the state treasure, right? If such a situation arises, right? And the reason behind and why Borni took such a stand, and why he is suggesting the king to do all these things, because all these things were related to the justice. So if there is no justice, then people may lose trust in the government, and out of injustice people become morally corrupt, morally weak. And when the praja becomes morally corrupt and weak, then the entire sultanate or kingdom become very weak, and the other king or other sultanate may defeat that kingdom. So that's how that is why justice for Borni was very much important. So if such a situation arises, Borni can suggest such things. And the reason behind of this suggestion that maintaining the justice was that if there is a price hike of commodities, then it will directly affect the army, and who are the huge number of army belongs to the subaltern rank or belongs to the lower strata of the society, right? And it will directly affect them, and they become very weak. And when army become weak, then uh, there is a danger for the kingdom or for the sultanate. right? And the second reason was that it might have led to discontentment among the people, general public. And today we are also experiencing this thing. So when there is a price rise, rise of price, and there is no kind of government subsidy, and when government is not taking any responsibility of price hike, then people may uh, become unhappy. They may uh, you know a kind of discontentment is created among the general public, and that is not a good symbol for maintaining the kingdom. As revenue extraction were already severe, because 50% they were giving their 50% of their production, they were giving as a kind of tax. So as the revenue uh, exaction were already severe, there was no further possibility of its enhancement. So the Sultan cannot, increase the tax. So consequently, an increase in the salary of the army personnel was also ruled out. So, it is, let me explain it. It means that, so suppose there is an increase in the price. So that increase of price, to avoid that, or avoid this discontentment of general public, salary must also increase. Salary must also increase, right? So one hand price is increasing, on the other hand salary has to increase, right? And what is the source of the salary? Source of the salary is the revenue. Already there is, a severe kind of exaction of revenue. 50% of the production is taken as a revenue. So the Sultan cannot take more than the 50%, right? So when the Sultan cannot take more than the 50%, then the salary cannot be increased for the army personnel. Salary cannot be increased. So on one hand, price is rising. On the other hand, salary cannot be increased. In such a situation, Borny is suggesting, you know, don't suggesting king not to, take any land tax, supplying food to the buyer at the production cost, and if there is a necessity, give monetary help to the needy from the state treasure. That's the only way to dismantle the bad time or the abnormal situation. So another aspect of justice and the security of the state was the remission of the taxes. At least during the calamities, Borny suggested the king should remit and reduce tax and extend monetary help from the treasure. Failure of crop with the price increase, coupled with the continuation of revenue collection in the same portion as during the normal harvest seasons, might have created discontentment among the population. To avoid it, Borny suggested towards forsaking the revenue exaction, right? So it is the same thing, right? So when there is a situation like calamity, now in that situation, you know uh, the king should remit the tax till the situation gets better, right? So by doing that, the king avoid or the king you know uh, that discontentment among the people can be avoided, can be dealt by the king by tax remission, right? So that's it. So I'm stopping here. So there will be last class of Bernie tomorrow, right? So tomorrow we will end this Bernie. So something is there is left. I have to tell you that justice. Then we will conclude the Bernie, right? So after this Bernie, then who are there? Um, who are there in your syllabus after this Bernie?
Kabir sir.
Another
Agana Sutta.
Agana Sutta is a Buddhist thinker. There is another, I mean, popular Abul Fazl, Abul Fazl, right? So I'm also interested to know the Abul Fazl. So thank you very much. Again, I'm not taking question. If you have question, you ask me in the WhatsApp. I will sort immediately. I
Sir,
will answer. Yes.
sir, what about the internal marks, sir? Means,
I
if
will give
you
a task.
pass inter.
So yes, that is important actually. I have to conduct your third internal also, right? So I will let you know your first, second, and third internal at the center. So I was actually busy, I'm working in a university in a single person. So both personal and professional life is very, I'm so busy that cannot handle everything, right? So definitely I will let you know your internal mark. But before that, let me know when you are going to, give your third internal. The first week of January, is it okay? Is it okay? First week of January.
Okay, sir.
I will let you know the date in the WhatsApp. So thank you very much.